Hey guys, welcome back to miptalk. Noam, Dromi here, as always. I've got our good friend and studios co-host Brad Rowe behind the camera. Say hi, Brad.
Hey guys, what's up?
We are very fortunate to have a good friend of the show with us today, the lovely and talented Eileen Grubba.
Hi.
This is Eileen. We are going to be launching a new feature called Conversations with the World's Most Inspiring People, and Eileen is going to be joining us to do some of those interviews with some of the world's most inspiring people. So I think one of the great things for us about miptalk has really been this growing national and international audience. There's people calling, well, maybe not so much calling, but people emailing and Facebooking and Twittering, talking about how they've been inspired by a particular story that we've shared, charity we focused on or whatever. And I know that in my discussions with you, it really became a question of how do we expand that and how do we really kind of put forth an effort to find the world's most inspiring people in a way. And I'm excited about what you're going to do. So why don't you talk to the audience a little bit about kind of why this is important and what people can expect.
Why this is important? Well, this is important to me because as I've traveled through life, I find everybody's challenged in one way or another, some much more so than others. And I know that every time I've had a battle to face, I've always looked for inspiration. Someone who's been through it, someone who's been through worse. I remember hearing a saying once that if anyone ever has been able to do it, then you can do it. And I always think of that every time I'm hit with anything or someone I love is hit with something like terminal or whatever. There's always the thought in my head that, well, if anyone ever survived, then I can survive. If anyone ever did the impossible thing for their career, then I can do it. And so I just feel like people more than ever in these dark and challenging times we're facing around the world, that people more than ever need to be inspired. And so it excites me and lights me up to be able to have the opportunity to go out and find the people that I find inspiring.
So let's even talk a little bit about that. Like, who are some of the people of late who you've heard about or who have come into your life who are really what you consider to be inspirational people?
Inspirational people. Well, there are a lot of them. Lately, I've been noticing older women have been very inspiring to me because I've met some who are just phenomenal, and that's one of the challenges I faced in my life was losing my mom early. And I always felt like because of that, there's this huge chunk of information missing, and if I only had that information, life would be easier and make more sense. And so
have you found, is that ultimately the case, or?
Well, I have found some very, very inspiring women lately who not only are they inspiring and what they do inspiring, but they surround themselves with inspiring people who actually, yes, getting to know them and seeing what they do and how they handle life has really helped me figure out how to move into, years beyond what my mother moved into, you know what I mean? Like recently I told you about Elaine Madsen, who went out and did a documentary called I Know a Woman Like That. And she found all these amazing women, some of them close to 100 years old, that are just still out there doing everything they ever wanted to do, behaving like 20-year-olds, water skiing, doing yoga, standing on their heads, going into dance competitions, starting businesses when they're 85.
That's amazing.
And her whole documentary is so amazing. And then she, as I got to know her, I found out she had a hell of a life. One that would make anyone go, wow, how are you still going and trying and loving and opening up? She just got married, and she's, I think, close to 80.
Oh, wow. So for people who might not know, tell us a little bit about who Elaine Madsen is, like what her
Elaine
background
Madsen is just a beautiful human being. She's got a few children that are kind of well-known in the entertainment industry, and she used to run the playwright-directors unit at the Actors Studio, and that's how I know her. She's written some books of poetry. She's created this amazing documentary that's going out to festivals now. But what I find most interesting and most inspiring about her is that she's come from this very dark past with some really horrific things having happened to her, and she turned it into art and poetry. And she has this book called Crayola Doesn't Make These Colors.
Wow.
That's all about the challenges of life and how if if you use them to shape your world, you become such a colorful human being. And her poems, I mean, they start with these are the things that happen, and then they go to the lessons learned, and then the inspirations and the conclusions she came to, and it's just very inspiring.
No,
and
absolutely.
Then to see her documentary is just wow.
Well, certainly those are things that I know we'll be turning the audience onto, as well as a lot of other new things. I want to focus a little bit on kind of two significant cornerstones that have really informed you and your life. One, as it relates to how you have managed some professional challenges, and then another that has related to some challenges that presented themselves in the last couple of years that connected you with an amazing group of medical professionals in Houston. So why don't we, share a little bit with the audience about some of the fairly significant challenges you've faced, and specifically how you've navigated those things.
Yeah, okay. Well, my fun little challenges started when I was 4. I was a very happy, healthy kid from a normal home, and got a bad vaccination for school, and I ended up...
It was the polio vaccine.
Yeah, we had oral polio, DPT, the whole series of vaccines all on the same day. And 30 days later, as I'm like running through a park doing flips and all kinds of things, I just landed at one point and couldn't feel my legs. And it wasn't from a fall or anything like that. It just, something attacked my spinal cord. And at the time, they had no idea what the problem was, but it was paralysis had hit my spine, and it was moving up fast. And I couldn't feel my legs at all. When it happened, my parents had no idea. My mom just thought I was a kid messing around. And by the end of the day, they figured out that my whole body was shutting down and had me rushed into an emergency room. And there began the adventures of my life that never ended. So initially, they were told that I
would never
live.
walk. Oh, that you wouldn't even live.
Not live.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was not in intensive care, but like right in the nurse's station, hooked up to all these things, spinal tap and all. And
do you have any
scared to
conscious memory?
Oh, yeah.
That you do.
Oh, yeah, I do. I have a very conscious memory of all that. Being first ripped out of their arms and, screaming, "Don't leave me here." And just, I remember that thing they had to put in my spine and all the things they stuck to my body and the IVs. And I think I lived in terror of needles for many years after that. But I did live, and then they were told that I would never walk again.
Oh, wow.
And I was in a wheelchair. They found some doctor who was really smart, and he hit my body with massive doses of cortisone and somehow halted the virus before it moved further up my spinal cord. But I was left paralyzed from the waist down.
Wow.
Yeah. And they kind of gave up on me, but I didn't give up on me.
And your parents didn't give up on you.
My parents didn't give up on me. They just kind of like, they accepted it. And I hated every night having to call my mom to wake her up when I had to go to the bathroom. I hated being dependent. I hated that my family was so upset and distraught and distressed over everything that was happening. And so I used to kind of always try to force myself out of my bed onto my legs, which now, all these years later, like 5 years later? No.
Because you're 15. So.
All these years later, what I was doing as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, trying to make my legs work, pushing myself onto my bed and all that off my bed onto my legs, they're doing now at UCLA Spinal Center.
Oh, wow.
Forcing quadriplegics to put weight on their legs to get the nerves to start responding again. And I'm like, so I was a pretty smart little kid. No.
You were well ahead of the curve, it sounds like. So.
I was just like so determined because it didn't make sense to me. I was like, I used to be able to run and do all these things. Now I can't.
And it's great.
Why?
And it's great that when you're a kid, you don't really think about the concept of can't. You just want to figure out how to actually be able to do it. So.
I just kept thinking, I have to get better, so everyone can be happy again, And it was a long haul. I mean, it was a long, difficult, and challenging haul. I remember sitting there in my little wheelchair and, watching everything go around. And I used to make my mom set me at the football games right on the track, right in front of the cheerleaders. Like, I didn't want to sit in the stands with everybody. I wanted to be, like, right in front of the cheerleaders. And I would look up at them and just be like, I'm going to be a cheerleader.
And lo and behold, you were.
I was. I was. I started cheerleading as soon as I got out of that wheelchair. As I got older, I ended up having to have a bunch of surgeries that started when I was in high school because the bones were breaking down. And they didn't really know how to fix it, but they were bit by bit going in and cutting them open and trying this and trying that. And so I went through a lot of surgeries. And actually, when I was 23, the bones of my left leg were just starting to come through.
Oh, wow.
I had no visible, like, foot. It was just kind of
a blob.
I was walking on the bones of my leg because there wasn't enough muscle to hold the foot up.
Ouch.
And so I found a doctor, interestingly enough, right after my mother died, which I was sure was her doing from up above, because it was like immediately. She used to always say, if I could give you my legs, I would. And she passed away, and a few months later, my legs were getting so bad that they were having to put casts on. They'd put a cast on one, and I'd be in crutches, and when that one started to heal up, then the other one would be shot, and I was going back and forth, and the left one was getting so bad, the weaker one, that when I was 23, this doctor I found literally rebuilt the whole thing, like built it upright and put metal parts in and just built this.
We have the technology.
Yes, we have the technology. But it took 4 years.
Wow.
To recover from that surgery.
And
I was back in a wheelchair off my feet for a whole another year almost.
Wow.
That time I was studying my acting, which I kept doing. I would go in my wheelchair to my classes and just keep learning, and that was a lot of years ago. But I always had something I was doing. I was an artist, so whenever I was confined, in spaces that I couldn't move, I was always building, creating, sewing, drawing.
So being creative, being active, those were really important things to keep your mind.
Absolutely.
From
I grew up in a faith-based household for sure, and my parents they weren't people who were of lip service. They meant it. You know what I mean? They were like
the idea of God and faith all were very important.
They believed it, they meant it,
and did a lot of that serve you?
It did.
Oh, that's important. Faith really can sustain people at dark times.
So. Oh yeah. I have to say the things that really got me by are that I had a strong faith that my parents instilled in us, and one of the things that has always and to this day kept me going were every bit of wisdom my mother ever gave me since I was a child. And that is true. To this day, her words ring in my head. Even the ones that didn't make sense when she was telling me as a child. There were times when she would say things that I was just like, yeah, whatever, as a kid. And
but they stuck
years
somehow.
Years later, I was like, oh, that's what she meant.
Oh, it is amazing.
And that's why that mattered. And my mother, I've since strongly believed that my mother just went straight to heaven and became an angel. I believe she's an angel because her presence is just around me all the time.
Well, no,
and her words come back to me all the time. And every time I've ever been in real trouble, the right people come and they have the right things to say, and sometimes they will be the things she used to say. And it's just amazing to me sometimes the inspirations that'll come. And along the way, there have been a lot of interesting, neat people who inspire the hell out of me. Oops, sorry. Not supposed to cuss. But, I have an aunt who has had one of the hardest lives I've ever heard of, ever. She grew up in the times when divorce was just so wrong. And you were an outcast in your neighborhood if you were divorced with children. And she had 8 kids. And her husband was a cheating, philandering thing her whole life, and finally she divorced him and took her 8 kids. Now 2 of those kids had cancer when they were babies.
Oh my.
2 others had, I forget which illness, but it took their lives at 8 and 11. They say the worst emotional suffering for a human being is a mother losing a child. And so she's been through that, and then her kids weren't allowed to play with the other kids in the neighborhood because of the divorced mom and all that stuff, and she somehow survived and got through all those things, and she's had 10 more things hit since then. But every time there's a gathering of relatives, you can walk into a hotel and hear my aunt laughing from afar. She's always laughing, and nothing in normal life bothers her. Nothing. because of everything she's been through. And I'm just like, wow, I want to be like that.
Well,
and
it seems like you're doing a good job of getting in that.
My Aunt Dolores, she's very inspiring, and she's like, well, you know what? Hard times teach you. They teach you how to live.
So I think for me, what is exciting is that we're going to find the people like your Aunt Dolores, people who I think are cut from the same cloth as you, your mom, you know, the women in your family, as well as others out there. I think who are really trying to make a difference, because what really connected for me in terms of some of the points that you had made is that, man, we are going through such a hard time right now, and that, you know, people are facing foreclosure of their homes, economic challenges, and there really feels like this undercurrent of depression and frustration and disappointment with the state of the country. Yeah. And yet somehow there are always those shining examples of people who are being selfless and being hopeful and being inspirational.
Right.
So I'm excited that the audience is getting to meet you today, and you're going to go out there and bring us some amazing stories. And in terms of people wanting to get a hold of you right now, if they have stories that they want to share with you, they can do that at Eileen at miptalk.com. That's EILEEN at miptalk.com, and we'll make sure to get the word out.
Years later, all that stuff I went through as a child, it seemed I was exposed to a bit too much radiation, and I was diagnosed with cancer about 7 years ago. And it was just after both my parents had died from it, so it was a little scary. And at that time, I was a little bit freaked out because, along with everybody else in our country, I had just, you know, lost everything I had in the market. And I was like sitting there with nothing, thinking, well, nothing else can go wrong. That's the upside. And then they were like, well, you have a cancerous tumor in your throat. And I'm like, well, there's that. Sometimes you're just like, you know, and I remember that. It was a dark couple of days there. I had a few holy temper tantrums by myself. And, what ultimately happened is I ended up in Houston, Texas at the best cancer institution in the world. And
what is that called?
MD Anderson Cancer Center. And fortunately, I have a friend from childhood who brought me in there and asked a couple of the top doctors in the world if they would take my case, given everything I'd been through, to minimize trauma. And I did end up in the hands of the guy they refer to as the Steven Spielberg of the medical industry, the guy who is the top head and neck cancer surgeon in the world, and the top oncologist for thyroid cancer in the world. And then because of them, I went through that experience, and the cancer has never returned, thank God. And they did find a lot of other areas that I was at risk that I wasn't even aware of. And so I think they might have saved my life a few times now. And I was actually sent back a few years later by a show called Miracle Workers that was for DreamWorks and ABC, because I was sent out to find all the top doctors in the world. And it just so happens I knew a bunch of them.
That's amazing.
So after we interviewed all the people in these areas, I was like, we really have to go to Houston. You have to meet the doctors in Houston. And I interviewed hundreds of them. And then a few years after that, every time I came into Houston for my follow-ups and treatments and all that stuff, there was always a doctor or two who wanted to go to dinner, and because, you know, they're all fascinated by Hollywood. And then that very friend who brought me there went to work for a guy who is a top radiologist, and they had an idea for a movie, and they brought me in to talk about it, and we decided it was better as a TV series. And so we've been building this TV series that's based on all this technology of these top doctors in the world.
That's amazing. And
it's going to be a scripted medical drama. A lot of the information and technology in it no one's even ever heard of. And I asked those doctors, because of my own particular experience and struggles through cancer, and because of all the people I met along the way, I asked them, I said, you know, if we could get this TV show launched as a successful scripted drama, a show like that could make billions of dollars. And what if we just took like 5% of that and helped patients who can't get the care they need, or put it back into your research? And they were like, yes, let's do that. So we have this big goal, and now that TV show is out there being shopped, and we're getting closer and closer to getting it made. So my goal is to emulate these amazing people who I find excessively inspiring because they spend their lives figuring out how to save lives, and they're brilliant. And then if we had this hugely successful show, we'd be able to help a lot of patients who couldn't get the care they need.
Absolutely.
Which to me, really, if that happened, it would have been worth getting cancer for. Sorry, it's the truth, but it is the truth.
It is funny. I think, like we've said, it's funny how things unexpectedly come to you and what you make out of them.
Yeah.
Well, it's so exciting, and we're so excited to have you as a part of the miptalk family.
Thanks for having me.
Yay.
My mom would say it was a blessing in disguise.
I love it. For more information on the new Conversations with the World's Most Interesting People, you can always visit us at the website, www.miptalk.com, also on Facebook and Twitter. And we will have a lot more with Eileen Grubba in the new year. Thanks, guys.